Hello BookTube, Sarah here and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm coming to you with my July 2017 wrap-up. So, I have a lot of books to talk about, so let's jump right in and get started. So as usual, we're going to start with my stats for the month. So this month, or in July, I read 20 books. Yeah, 20 books. According to Goodreads, I am 5 books ahead of schedule. There's a reason I got that many books read, and I will get to that in a minute. So I read 3 5-star books, 2 4.5-star books, 2 4-star books, 4 3.5-star books, 8 3-star books, and 1 2-star book. I read 11 romance, 6 fiction, 1 historical romance, 1 memoir, and 1 romantic suspense. I read 14 adult novels, 5 middle grade novels, and 1 YA novel. I read 5 books that were published in the 1980s, 3 that were published in the 2000s, 9 that were published between 2010 and 2016, and 3 books that were published this year in 2017. I read 17 ebooks and 3 audiobooks, 19 novels and 1 novella. I read a grand total of 5,460 pages, which works out to be approximately 176 pages a day. My year-to-date page count, in case you're curious, is 28,806 pages. So, like I said, 20 books. That's a lot. That's quite the jump from last month. But as you guys know, if you've been watching my channel, I have been reading my Babysitters Club books again, and I'm working my way through the series. So that's what jumped up my book count and page count and all those other things. So I did rate every single one of these Babysitters Club books, but I originally had them lumped in with the rest of the books, but I decided to keep them separate, and I'm just going to go through the ones that I read and give you guys the star rating on them, and then we will continue on with the rest of the books. So, the first one, of course, and all the Babysitters Club books, in case you didn't know, are all by Ann M. Martin. The first book was Kristy's Great Idea. That book was given 5 stars. That book will always be given 5 stars by me. I love it. It was the beginning of this series that defined my childhood and defined, you know, the start of me reading and loving reading. So again, this book will always get 5 stars. The second book in the series was Claudia and the Phantom Phone Calls, and I gave that book 3.5 stars. The next book, book number 3, The Truth About Stacey, I gave that book 3 stars. Marianne Saves the Day is book number 4, and I gave that 3.5 stars. And book number 5, Dawn and the Impossible 3, got 3 stars. So let's jump right into all the books that I read this month, all the other books I read this month. So if you're new to my channel, the way that I do this is I go my least favorite book to my most favorite book. And my wrap-ups used to be super duper long, and I still feel like they are a little long, but for most of the books, I'm just going to give you guys a very quick explanation about why I did or didn't like the book, and then for my top 3 books, I will go into a bit of a longer explanation and talk about them in a little bit more detail. So, my least favorite book of the month, unfortunately, was Nothing But Blue Skies by Kristy Ridgway. I gave this book 2 stars. It was published in 2000. This was the book club pick for July, and I just didn't care for it. I did a full review on this book, so if you're interested in checking it out, I will leave a link in the description box below, and you can go and see that. Next up, Blackmailed Into the Fake Engagement by Leanne Banks. I gave this book 3 stars. It's the first book in the Hudsons of Beverly Hills series, and it was published in 2008. I had a couple problems with this book. It was written very well. I like Leanne Banks as an author. But the main lead character is supposed to be an Academy Award-winning actress, but yet throughout the book they talked about the fact that she needed money. So now granted, maybe she was bad with her money, but still, it just seemed a little odd. I also found the main lead character, the male, to be very domineering, and I didn't like that at all. It was a well-written story. I like Leanne Banks. I will continue on with the series. Next up, Too Hot to Handle by Tessa Bailey. I gave this book 3 stars. It is the first book in the Romancing the Clarkson series, and it was published in 2016. This is a really cute premise for a story. It's about 4 siblings whose mother passes away years earlier, and they decide to kind of do a road trip because they found their mother's diary, and she wanted them all to do this. So this is them getting stranded in a small town, and the main female character falling for a local guy. This book was heavy on the sex, not that there's a problem with that, but I just didn't believe in the romance part. I believed it was just purely physical, and I do prefer the romance over the physical attraction any day of the week. Next up is Off the Ice by Julie Cross. I gave this book 3 stars. It's the first book in the Juniper Falls series, and it was published in 2017. I heard about this book from Jen from Today in Jen's Library, and it sounded really cute. I'm not a big YA fan, but I really like the cover of this one, and I like the premise about a boy who plays hockey and, you know, a girl and all those things. I enjoyed the story, but I felt there was far too many issues that were being dealt with in this book. Like, it was all trying to be crammed into one story. And also, obviously, he's a hockey player, but I felt the hockey talk got to be far too technical. You know, they go out and they play a game, and you're going to hear a lot about hockey, and, you know, they play, and that's their whole lives. But when it starts to get really technical on how to play the sport, I just find it incredibly boring, and I tend to tune that out. So, if that could have been backed off a little bit, I might have enjoyed it a bit more. But again, it wasn't a bad story. If you like YA and you like sports romance, definitely check it out. Next up is Fireworks Frappe by Courtney Hunt. This book I gave 3 stars to. It is the 7th book in the Cupid's Coffee Shop series, and it was published in 2016. I don't have much to say about this one. It was an adorable little novella, a perfect little summertime read. I love this series, and I absolutely recommend it to everybody. Next up is The Night is Forever by Heather Graham. I gave this book 3 stars. It is the 11th book in the Crew of Hunters series, and it was published in 2013. This was a really great addition to the series. It had a lot of action in it. It really kept me guessing. It took place on a horse farm, which was a lot of fun. And yeah, just a really fun little book in the series. Not one of the best, but not one of the worst. Next up is One Evening in Paris by Nicolas Barreau. I gave this book 3 stars. It was published in 2012. This one was a little different for me, and I quite enjoyed it. It was a romance novel about a man who owns a theater in Paris, and he falls in love with a woman who has been coming into the theater for like a year, and he never talked to her, and now he does. The sad part is that, I mean, the writing was wonderful. The characters were fantastic. But it was very melancholy at the end and a little sad. Like, it wasn't your typical happily ever after. But I still enjoyed it, and I absolutely recommend it. Just not one of my favorite books this month. The next book is A New Leash on Love by Debbie Burns. I gave this book 3.5 stars. This is the first book in the Rescue Me series, and it was published in 2012. This I actually received from NetGalley, in exchange for a review. I enjoyed this book quite a bit. Both of the main characters were flawed, and they both had great backstories that worked out really, really well together. As an animal lover, I really appreciated that this book was set in a no-kill shelter. That was fantastic. Also, one of the guys who works at the shelter's name is Patrick, and he actually has Asperger's. So that was very interesting to read about. One of the things I didn't like so much about this, and I might be nitpicking a little bit, is that the main lead character, he has a son. And he's got, the family has a backstory that they are dealing with. But the son would often use words like gay and retarded and stuff like that. And now he's an 8-year-old boy. And 8-year-old boys are going to do that. But the fact that the parents never reprimanded him for that, it kind of bothered me. Again, I might just be nitpicking, but, you know. But other than that, like those really small issues, it was really, really well written. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I absolutely believed in the romance, and I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of the series. Next up, What I Had Before I Had You by Sarah Cornwell. I gave this book 3.5 stars. It was narrated on audio by Karen White, and it was published in 2017. I saw this book from my library. I downloaded it on Overdrive, and I saw it as one of the new releases, and it was available, and it looked like a great little summer read because of the cover on the Jersey Shore. But it was a great summer read, but it's not the light and fluffy beach read that you might be expecting, which is kind of what I was expecting in a way. It's about a woman who goes back to her hometown and brings her son and daughter. She's newly divorced, and her son goes missing. But there's a whole other part of the story that follows that. The main characters suffer from several mental issues. The grandmother had it, the mother has it, and the son have it, and it goes back and forth from the main character's childhood, growing up with a mother who was, I believe it's bipolar, to her dealing with her own issues with bipolar and her son's issues with being bipolar. It was very, very dark. It was not very dark, but it was darker than what I typically read. And it was also very, very melancholy, but I really did enjoy it. I had a hard time reading this book because on one hand I really did enjoy it, and it was super well written and the characters were fantastic. But on the other hand, like I said, it was super melancholy and a little sad, you know, but so just take it with a grain of salt. But I do recommend it if you like that kind of fiction type of novel. Next up is To Love a Cop by Janice K. Johnson. I gave this book 4 stars, and it was published in 2015. This was a Harlequin super romance novel, and I enjoyed this book a lot. It dealt with some very heavy issues, gun violence, suicide, and it did it very, very well. The characters were very well written, and the issues were well documented and well talked about. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I don't really have too much bad to say about it. The next book is The Inn at Eagle Point by Sherryl Woods. I gave this book 4 stars. It is book number 1 in the Chesapeake Shores series, and this book was published in 2009. I love this series. This is a reread series for me. This is about Abby, who returns to her hometown to help her sister open up the inn that they are, the sister has purchased and is revamping, and runs into her old flame, and the story goes from there. It's really, really great. Sherryl Woods is a fabulous, fabulous author. I absolutely recommend this series if you enjoy contemporary romance. Next up is The Songbird Sisters by Rachael Herron. I gave this book 4.5 stars. It is the 3rd and final book in the Songbirds of Darling Bay series, and it was published in 2017. This is another one I received from NetGalley in exchange for a review. I love this. I love the first 2 books in the series. I purchased them myself. When I was approved for this one, I was thoroughly excited about it. This is Lana's story, the baby sister of the family. It was really fantastic. The romance between her and Taft was absolutely wonderful, as well as the relationship between her and her sisters. Not only is it a great romance, but it was a great family story, and I absolutely recommend this entire series. It is absolutely fantastic. And if you like country music, that's an even bigger bonus, because of course the sisters used to be country music artists, so highly, highly recommend. Next up, A Kiss at Midnight by Eloisa James. I gave this book 4.5 stars. It is the first book in the fairy tale series. It was narrated on audio by Susan Durdrin. Durdrin, I believe I'm saying that correctly, and it was published in 2000. I adored this book. It is a Regency romance, sort of. But I think I talked about this in one of my Friday reads. It's like a Regency romance that's like outside of Regency time. Almost like a magical realism kind of book. It's a retelling of Cinderella. And, there's no specific time period that this is based in. Most historical romance novels or most historical novels that you read, when you start reading it, like on that first page it'll say, Arizona Territory, 1826. That didn't have any of this, so it was kind of up to the reader's imagination as to when it took place. There's actually an author's note in the back that she does talk about this. But like I said, it's a retelling of Cinderella, and, she's the stepsister, and she has to go in her sister's place to meet her, the sister's, betrothed family, and, she's pretending to be her sister, and it's a wonderful book. It's so whimsical and so much fun. I will definitely be reading the rest of the books in this series. I think the next one's like Beauty and the Beast. There's one that's Princess and the Pea. So they're not your standard typical fairy tales. Like Cinderella's pretty standard when it comes to retellings, but the rest of them are a little different. So I'm really, really looking forward to them. The writing was wonderful. The characters were wonderful. If you like Regency romance, please check out this series. And on audio, it was fabulous. The narration was absolutely beautiful. I just loved it. Second last. Talking as Fast as I Can by Lauren Graham. I gave this book 5 stars. It was narrated on audio by Lauren Graham, and it was published in 2016. I love this so much. When I got my library card back, this was the first book that I put on hold because I heard so many people on BookTube talking about it. Now, I didn't grow up watching the Gilmore Girls. It was on. My mother watched it, and it just wasn't my kind of show at the time. I have now, before reading this book, have gone back, and I think I'm into season 3 now on Netflix. So I am really enjoying it. I adore Lauren Graham. She's a fabulous actress. This book was wonderful. I'm not a huge fan of hers. Like I said, I just recently started watching the Gilmore Girls, and I never watched, Parenthood was the other show that she was on? I'm aware of who she is, but I wasn't a huge fan. But I still thoroughly enjoyed this. She is so down to earth. She talks about her childhood. She talks about being in Hollywood. She talks about the Gilmore Girls. There's a whole chapter where she pretty much talks about, like, her favorite episodes in each season, how she was dressed, her hair, things like that. It might seem a little superficial, but it was super duper fun. And it wasn't really spoilery because I didn't retain as much of the plot line, but more about what she was talking about. She is really funny. She gets into a relationship with Peter Krause. And she talks about the new season of the Gilmore Girls and how it came back and how that all manifested. And yeah, If you're a fan of the Gilmore Girls and you haven't checked this out yet, I highly recommend it. If you just like celebrity memoirs, I absolutely recommend this book. I adored it. Absolutely adored it. And my final book and favorite book of the month was My One and Only by Kristan Higgins. I gave this book 4 stars. It was originally published in 2011. Now that I'm finished reading it, because I think I talked about this in my Friday reads, I couldn't remember if I'd read this book or not before, and I didn't. When it got to the ending, it did not ring any bells to me at all. This book was just, I wrote it down here because I couldn't even, it was memorable, funny, heartwarming, and heartbreaking all at the same time. This is the story about a woman who is a divorce attorney, and she is called back, she's called to Montana, I think it's Montana, to go to her sister's 3rd wedding. Her sister's younger than her, and she's been married 3 times. Harper is the main character, and she does not believe in marriage or love or romance. She sees the bad side of it being a romance, or being a divorce attorney, excuse me. Of course, while she's there, who does she run into? Her ex-husband. So yes, she had been married once upon a time, and, you know, that probably hardened her to marriage as well. And then the 2 of them need to take a road trip back from, I think it's Montana, to, not Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, I believe, is where the characters are originally from. And that whole road trip is the bulk of the book, and it is just wonderful. And it's written in trademark Kristan Higgins wit and humor, but also, you know, again, her trademark way of writing these stories where she gives you the present storyline, and then she also gives you the storyline that happened in the past. And there's a scene in this book where they talk about Harper and, I'm sorry, I cannot remember his last name, or his name, her ex-husband, the breakup of them, Nick, I think it is. It's Harper and Nick, and the breakup of their marriage and the night that the marriage ended, and I was in tears. I mean, it was just so heart-wrenching. Even though you see them now together again, and even though they're not together, they're together, and it's a romance. You know how it's going to end, but it still just breaks your heart, and I cried, and I mean, I'll admit, I'm a little oversensitive sometimes, and I do tend to cry a little bit more often than most people, but still, this is probably now one of my favorite Kristan Higgins novels. I tend to give most of her books a 5-star because I love them so much, but this one, you know, if I had to rate even within the 5 stars, this would be higher up on the list than some of them. So yes, if you have not read this one yet and you want to, I definitely recommend it. It's just a great story, and the characters are great. There's always that, you know, those, the crazy relatives and stuff like that. And of course, it's a road trip book. Who doesn't love a great romance road trip book? So anyway, guys, that is it for this. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope this wasn't too super duper long. I'm doing my best to keep these relatively short while still giving you guys lots of information. Anyway, please let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books and what did you think about them, or what was your favorite book in the month of July, because I'd love to know that as well. And anyway, guys, until my next video, take care and happy reading. Bye.